An immediate and enduring impression of central Canada is the abundance of space. The prairies, lakes, and forests all seemingly stretch without end. This openness belies the vast number of animal and plant species that have populated the region. There is no shortage of researchers whose work is instrumental in understanding and safeguarding those populations. The importance of conservation efforts is no more apparent than in the work done to bring one of the region's most iconic species back from the brink of extinction.
Riding Mountain National Park was established in 1929 to protect representative pieces of the Canadian landscape for recreation as well as for protection of wildlife and habitat. I'm Wiebo Vanderskuyt. I'm a biologist here at Riding Mountain National Park. As a biologist, I coordinate a lot of the monitoring and research projects in the park, which is approximately in the very center of Canada. In the early to mid 1800s, when exploration in Western Canada began, there were something like 10 to 70 million bison in the prairies of North America. But due to programs to eliminate bison as a food source for native people in the U.S. and also for use of the furs off the bison for bison coats, buffalo coats, a lot of them were shot in a 30 or 40 year period in the 1800s. By 1890, they estimate there are only a few hundred left. One rancher in Manitoba started collecting the remnant bison that were left and ended up with a herd of about 700 animals, which were sold to the government of Canada in 1907. And that's basically the reason we have plains bison still in Canada. And from that herd, bison were distributed to other national parks over the next 40 years or so. And Riding Mountain got 10 or 12 bison from that herd in 1946 and established a captive herd here. We try and keep it below 45 because the enclosure, the fenced area where they're kept, can only sustain so many animals. The bison calves are born in the spring and early summer. The bulls that are in the herd will breed the cows that are available from the end of July until the end of August for about a month. And then they're basically feeding and preparing for the cold winter ahead. In the fall, we move the bison to the north half of their enclosure. We have two separate pastures. Usually in early December, we run the bison through a capture facility. We check on their general health, and if necessary, we remove excess animals to bring the population down a little bit. At that time, we can also introduce new bulls, so there's new genetic material in the population, and we'll remove some of the old bulls so there's not too much fighting. There is some speculation now that there are lots of bison farms around the province, that we should possibly release the bison to roam freely in the park. This might be a tricky proposition because there might be a tendency for the bison to wander outside the park and disturb crops or farm animals in the surrounding landscape. But we're hoping to look at that possibility in the future.
Each summer, migrant birds take advantage of the season's abundance. Keeping track of these visitors is a lifelong passion for some researchers.
The birds transverse around the lake, whether they're heading north or south, and the ridge actually funnels all the migrants along, and Delta Marsh Bird Observatory is situated right in the middle of that ridge. So we catch an awful lot of birds and we get an awful lot of visual migration. My name's Ian Thompson, and along with my partner Yvonne, we're from the UK. We are master banders and we're here working at Delta Marsh Bird Observatory in Manitoba, which is part of the University of Manitoba field station, actually situated within the marsh. And we're here to run the observatory, which basically means bird banding in the fall and the spring for migrations. Banding is 7 days a week, and typically we start at 30 minutes after sunrise and they run for 6 hours. Delta Marsh is recognised as being the busiest of all observatories, being they catch more birds per net hour than any other observatories. Here we run 10 nets and we do net rounds on bikes. We start at 5 AM and finish at 11. The nets are checked every 30 minutes when birds are gathered and bagged and brought back to the banding lab for processing. Delta Marsh is renowned again for one particular bird, and that's the yellow warbler. It is recognised as the highest density of breeding birds. The processing involves firstly identifying the bird, secondly putting a unique numbered bird band on the legs, and then using plumage and size differential and characteristics, we will age and sex each species. While the birds are in hand, there can be a lot of biometric and visual data that you can take, which is very important. The data we collect in the fall would be of age and sex. We measure wing chord, we take fat, and we also look at molt, so we can check the progress of molt and when molt starts and finishes for each particular species. Most of the land birds here, like the warblers and things, are here because of the insects. The downside of working in a marsh is the ticks and the mosquitoes and the chironomids, which hatch in their millions from time to time, and these guys are all taking advantage of that. Most birds that you get here at this time of year are migrants. The white pelicans are no exceptions. They're subadult birds, so therefore they're non-breeders. What's happened is that they've followed their migratory instinct, but they're not breeding, so they're all just loafing around and having a jolly good time.
In the remote north, the flora and fauna play an important role in the daily lives of the region's human inhabitants. To understand the effects of climate change on this relationship, researchers and local guides participate in an empowering cross-cultural exchange.
We started working in the Belcher Islands 4 years ago because of the seals, how well they're doing and also how they're reacting to the warming climate and the loss of sea ice. I'm Stephen Ferguson, working with Fisheries and Oceans Canada on Arctic marine mammals, trying to understand the different science related to how the whales and seals interact with their environment, and hoping to make sure the Inuit subsistence harvest is done in a way that conserves the species for the future. We thought Hudson Bay would be a good area to work in because it's fairly southern for an ice-covered region, and as a result it's probably going to lose sea ice first, and animals like the seals are going to be impacted in some way. So we decided if we could work with the local hunters and in particular tag the seals and monitor the movements and dive behavior, we'd have an idea of how global warming is going to change the environment and how the seals will adapt or will not adapt. The local guides will help set up where the seals can be caught, where to put the nets. They provide all the safety information. They're watching the weather and checking conditions, so they're quite active in making sure the camp is successful. And then they'll also help out quite a bit with the tagging operation and processing the seals, and they can do pretty much all the activities. And the first thing we want to do is put the tag on the seal. We'll glue the tag onto the back of the neck of the seal. This is more or less a permanent glue, but the seals molt every year. They lose all of their fur, so one time in the spring the tag will fall off. The next thing we do is take the measurements, the length of the seal, its girth. Also look at the claw and count the number of lines on the claw, because that'll give us an indication of the age of the seal. We'll take a biopsy punch. With the biopsy tissue, we can look at the skin for evidence of what they've been eating, and the fat also show what recent fats have been in their diet. We'll take some hair samples and a bit of blood as well that provide genetics and other information. Our plan is to empower the Northerners with the use of the science. At some point, it may not be necessary for Southern scientists to go up and do a lot of this research, that the Northerners can take on the whole process themselves and actually start to use the techniques to answer their questions. Yeah, the local hunters and guides love working with the animals, in particular handling them and seeing how their knowledge of their ecology of the seals can be used to further our understanding. And I think further up in the organization, the Inuit culture, I think there's people that would see value in being able to harness science to help address questions that are more relevant to them. Well, for me, it's really the people. I just find working with the local Inuit a great pleasure, and I look forward to it every year, and some of the guides have become close friends. It's a great opportunity to see how they live and to share their lives.